Julie, it's a surprise. We're heading out with Mom, my spouse declared with assurance as he entered the room. I was astonished as I stared at him and his contented mother. I was shocked to learn that his mother was expecting because this was meant to be our honeymoon. I was at a loss for words, but before I could get my mouth working, my husband inquired, "What's wrong?" "Are you not content?" Naturally, I wasn't. He ought to have known that I had frequently voiced my displeasure to him over the strained bond between his mother and me. She thought I had stolen her darling son away, which is why she couldn't tolerate me. She would always be snarky when we met, but when my husband was present, she would behave like the ideal mother, so he would never believe me when I claimed she was tough. However, he continued to believe that taking her on our honeymoon was a wise decision. How could he have known? I asked him whether he had made reservations for her accommodation and flight. Looking perplexed, he remarked, "I thought I'd do it later." Raising my anger, I informed him that, given how far in advance we had booked ours, it was not feasible to secure a last-minute reservation during peak season. With a sneer, he added, "Then give us your ticket." I questioned him again since I didn't understand at first. "Give her your ticket if my mom is unable to attend," he continued, looking irritated. "I have the authority to choose because I paid for the vacation." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. To my utter shock, his mother was standing there looking smug. How was he able to believe that this was okay? This was our honeymoon, so it wasn't just an ordinary vacation. It never occurred to me that he would invite his mother on a particular day. My mother-in-law is someone I wouldn't even want to travel with on a typical vacation. She had a smug expression on her face, obviously pleased that her son was prioritizing her, while I stood there shocked. "Go ahead, move quickly. Since I paid for it, there shouldn't be any issues," my spouse remarked. Is he genuinely under the impression that he may do anything he wants because he paid for the trip? The cost of the trip crossed my thoughts as I considered this. Julie, by the way, is my name. At 31, I work for a firm that my father owns. People first assumed that my family was the sole reason I received the position, but as I worked hard, they eventually started to appreciate me. Because of my family's company, some people still spread rumors about me, which may be hurtful at times. My spouse Scott has always been my rock in times like this. Prior to dating, we were close coworkers and share the same age. Scott does a terrific job in his career, and my father has seen his efforts and hard work. My dad was overjoyed to learn that we were getting married. "Scott, I've heard good things about you," he remarked. "Observe my daughter." In response, my spouse said, "I'll definitely make her happy." Observing the instance filled me with pride. At the time, there were rumors that Scott might become the company's next president, and my dad was considering transferring the firm to the next generation. We had discussed company management over dinner a lot, even though my dad hadn't said anything explicitly, so we had a sense that it may happen eventually. Scott's mother resides alone in their family home, as his father died away many years ago. He is devoted to his mother, and during our courtship, he would drop everything to assist her in need. I smiled and always encouraged his devotion to her, because she was his only parent. I was impressed by his admiration for his mother and his sense of pride in being in his company. But since we've been living together and getting married, I've begun to have my concerns. He usually starts with, "I'm going to see Mom for a bit," and he sees her once a week. Is his mother sick? I worriedly questioned my hubby. "Is your mom okay?" "No, Julie, don't worry," he answered. "It's simply crucial to sometimes spend some alone time with her." He wasn't as kind about saying this as he used to be, but at first he was. He was humming a tune cheerfully one Monday morning when I inquired, "Are you going to your mom's house today?" His attitude abruptly altered. "Why do you say it like that?" was the question he posed after stopping what he was doing and inhaling deeply. I was astonished at how annoyed he appeared. I shrugged, wondering maybe I unintentionally came across as a little accusatory. "Mom is lonely by herself," he replied, glaring at me. "It's already been said. You can't seem to get along with her, so I go." Recognize I was offended by what he said. Although I do have problems with my mother-in-law, that wasn't always the case. I wanted to show my appreciation for the woman who brought my beloved up. I really did try to be nice to her, but she didn't feel the same way. She spotted me right away as the one who had taken her kid away. She seemed aloof when I initially met her. She looked me up and down, scrutinizing me, and her once friendly countenance went serious the instant my husband left the room. "So you're the daughter of the president? You seem like not much," she remarked. She looked so different without Scott that I was taken aback. She continued with more harsh words. "You dared to show up here after stealing Scott from me. Don't think for a second I accept you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then she made a rude slurping sound with her tea, not offering me any. When I nervously addressed her as mother-in-law, she snapped, "Don't call me that. It's unpleasant." I couldn't understand why she was being so hostile, especially since we had just met. When I tried to speak up, she immediately shut me down. I felt helpless. Soon I heard Scott's footsteps returning, and suddenly her attitude changed again. She smiled sweetly, offered tea, and acted like nothing had happened. "Sorry, I forgot to offer you tea," she said, laughing lightly as Scott entered the room. "Mother, you didn't serve the tea yet," Scott asked. "Your fiancé is so charming," she said with a smile, then turned to me and added, "Julie, feel free to call me mother-in-law anytime." A chill ran down my spine. Since then, my mother-in-law has continued to say hurtful things to me, but only when Scott isn't around. It's like she has two sides to her. My husband doesn't seem to see her true nature no matter what. When I talk to him about it, he just brushes it off, saying, "My mother would never do that." He adds, "If you're that uncomfortable, you don't have to meet her." He doesn't believe me at all. At first, I tried hard to explain, but eventually I got tired of him always defending his mom. Now I only visit her when absolutely necessary. My husband probably thinks I hate her. "Make sure to lock the door when you leave," he said, and just like always, he left without looking back. I tried to call out, "Wait," but he was already gone. His figure blurred as tears filled my eyes. After our argument about his mother, he hasn't been coming home much. Sometimes it feels like his mother is more important to him than I am. Aside from the issues with his mom, Scott is a great husband. He helps me when I'm stressed about work and even does his share of the house chores, even though he's busy with his own job. At least he agrees we don't need to visit her more than necessary. Thinking about all of this, I flip through travel brochures. I try to shake off the negative thoughts and focus on our upcoming honeymoon. I'm excited about this trip. It'll be a chance to forget about his mom for a while and enjoy some time together. No unexpected calls from her. I start thinking about possible destinations, keeping in mind that Scott just became the team leader for a new project. I'd love to treat ourselves to something a little luxurious on this trip. But then I remember what Scott said. "I left all the planning to you, but I want the payment to come from my account." I had wanted us to split the cost of the honeymoon, but he just laughed it off and didn't want to listen. It didn't feel right for him to pay for everything, so I decided to cover part of it myself. Being the president's daughter, I knew my mother-in-law's sarcastic comments about spending too much would only get worse. That thought made me smile. Riley, just as I had resolved to stay positive, my mother-in-law popped back into my mind. Enough of this, I told myself to change my mood. I put the brochure aside and started preparing dinner for my husband, who would be home soon. Then the morning of our honeymoon arrived. As I was busy getting things ready, the doorbell suddenly rang. "Yes, come in," I said, opening the door. I was shocked by what I saw. There she stood, my mother-in-law, dressed in flashy clothes with a large suitcase in hand. Before I could even process it, my husband peeked out and said, "Mom, you're early." He smiled at her while she didn't even look at me. I stood there, unable to hide my confusion. I asked, "Early? What do you mean?" Just as we were about to leave for our honeymoon, I saw her large suitcase. What could it mean? Was she planning to stay at our house during our honeymoon? Troubled by this thought, my husband happily announced, "It's a surprise. Mom is coming with us." I couldn't hide my shock, and a strange sound escaped me. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "Wait, what does this mean?" I was still in disbelief when my husband, full of excitement, repeated, "It's a surprise. Mom is coming along." As I stood there completely confused, he proudly put his arm around his mother's shoulder and said, "It'll be more fun with Mom." My mother-in-law smiled at me, and I asked, "Wait a minute. Isn't a honeymoon supposed to be just for the couple? Shouldn't we have at least discussed this beforehand?" I tried to stay calm, even though I knew I wasn't wrong. My husband, however, didn't seem to understand why I was upset. Why couldn't we see eye to eye? To make things worse, my mother-in-law seemed to be enjoying my discomfort, humming to herself. I couldn't believe this was happening on the day we were supposed to leave for our honeymoon. "Why would you do something like this as a surprise?" I asked angrily. My husband responded, "It's fine because I paid for everything, right?" He frowned, noticing my shock. "No, it's not fine," I said, realizing that his offer to pay for the trip wasn't to make me feel better, but to avoid any complaints about bringing his mom along. "That's not going to work," I objected, which made both my husband and his mother look unhappy. "Why won't it work?" he asked, while my mother-in-law taunted, "Julie doesn't want to travel with me, does she?" I felt a headache coming on. "That's not the point, Scott. What about your mom's plane ticket? Is the hotel booked?" My husband looked confused and said, "I thought we could book it later." "That's impossible." I raised my voice. "When do you think we booked our tickets and hotel? There's no way you can book flights and hotels now, especially during a busy holiday season." The hotel we chose wasn't too fancy, but it was decent, and it's fully booked. As I continued explaining, my husband said, "Then can you give us all your tickets?" For a moment, I didn't understand what he meant. "If there's no ticket for my mother, then give me yours." "I paid for the trip, so I have the right to do that," he repeated, clearly annoyed. I was stunned. My mother-in-law looked smug, and I was left in disbelief. What was I hearing? My husband continued, "My mom went through the trouble of getting ready, so I've decided it'll just be the two of us. We can go on another trip with you later." I couldn't believe how easily he chose his mother over me. What was he thinking? "It's okay if I'm not there." I said again, this is supposed to be our honeymoon, just me and my husband. I couldn't accept handing over our plans to my mother-in-law, who appeared out of nowhere. My husband kept saying his mother had prepared for the trip, but that didn't matter. If he wanted to keep the peace, she should step back. Yet I was shocked as he continued to push me to give up. "Come on, hurry up. There shouldn't be a problem since I paid for it," he said. I felt a headache coming on and sighed deeply. "Actually, I was going to keep this a secret," I said. "But my father is the one paying for this trip, Not you, so it doesn't make sense for you to demand the tickets, does it? My husband looked confused, like he couldn't believe what I was saying. He thought he had paid for everything, which is why he felt so entitled. Why would your father do that? He asked, surprised. I stared at him coldly. My father paid for the honeymoon as a gift so we could save money for our future. He even told me to keep it a secret because of your pride. Why did you keep this from me? My husband shouted, his face turning red with anger. My mother-in-law was just as shocked to hear my father had covered the costs. As I listened to my husband's angry words, I felt my patience running out. I had put up with my mother-in-law's behavior, and my husband always siding with her for far too long. If you two want to go on the trip, return the money to my father and make your own arrangements, I said coldly. Cancel the reservations and pay for it yourselves. Without waiting for their response, I grabbed my bags and left the house. This was no joke. It wasn't right for them to use my father's money, since I had handled all the bookings. Everything was in my name. I quickly canceled the flights and hotel and got into a taxi. Instead of heading to the airport, I told the driver to take me to my parents' house. When I arrived at home, dragging my suitcase behind me, my father was shocked to see me. After I explained everything, his face turned red with anger. What kind of story is this? Is this some sort of joke? He fumed. The constant calls from my husband only made my father angrier. I was furious too. This whole situation made me realize what I needed to do. Dad, I'm thinking about getting a divorce, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. My father calmed down, and instead of saying anything, he gently comforted me, stroking my back. I'm sorry, Dad, I whispered through my tears. He held my hand firmly. The next day, my husband showed up at my parents' house with a box of sweets as an apology. I was about to turn my husband away at the gate when my father stepped in. If you're thinking about divorce, we need to talk properly. Let's hear what he has to say, my father suggested. Even though I had planned to consult a lawyer, I followed his advice and let my husband in. As soon as my husband saw my father, he started apologizing right away. I felt annoyed seeing him act innocent in front of my dad. As he kept saying sorry, I sighed, and my father asked me to take him to the sitting room. My apologies for causing trouble, President, my husband said, bowing his head even before we had finished greeting each other. He often called my father President, even in private, claiming it had become a habit. But when he did, he always seemed to slip into a businesslike attitude. His practiced way of apologizing felt fake. What exactly are you apologizing for? My father asked, sighing. He was as frustrated as I was. My husband just kept saying, I'm sorry for the trouble, over and over. It wasn't an apology to me. It felt more like an insult. When he tried to explain himself, I cut him off and handed him the divorce papers. Do you know how to fill these out? I've already completed my part. Please look it over. I spoke calmly but firmly. My husband turned pale as he stared at the papers. Wait, Julie, divorce? He looked at me seriously for the first time since he'd arrived. I've always come second to you, Scott. That should be fine, right? You have your mother. I was ready to handle this like a business deal, refusing any attempts to patch things up. What are you talking about? Why bring my mother into this? He protested. She was excited about the trip too. We can go on another one together, Julie. Shocked by how little he understood, I replied, another trip. What does that even mean? This was supposed to be our honeymoon. I was shaking, biting my lip in frustration. What kind of husband brings his mother on a honeymoon? Where does that even happen? But instead of realizing his mistake, Scott doubled down. It was just a suggestion to bring her. At first, you said there were no flights or hotels available. He said, I couldn't believe it. How could you even think that was a reasonable idea at the last minute? I asked. He still didn't get it. Scott raised his voice, showing his anger. Are you saying we should send my mother back, even though she was looking forward to this trip? At that point, my father stepped in again, calming the situation. Let's stop this now, he said, his voice steady. After a long silence, he shook his head in disappointment. Scott, he said quietly, I'm really disappointed. Hearing this, Scott immediately straightened up and addressed him as president. My father looked at him with deep sadness and disappointment. After a heavy silence, my father asked, why did you choose your mother over Julie in a situation like this? The question hit Scott hard. He started stammering, struggling to find the right words. Well, he was clearly nervous, sweating as he tried to answer. While Scott could be assertive with me, he could never stand up to my father. My father continued, a honeymoon is meant for the couple. You could have taken your mother on a trip any time after that, right? Didn't you say you loved my daughter? Scott quickly shouted, I'm not lying. I just wanted to show my mother she's as important as Julie. At this sudden outburst, my father looked at him sternly for the first time. Even if it makes Julie sad, is that okay? My father pressed. Scott stammered again, trembling, before finally saying, I'm sorry. But the way he clenched his fist showed that his apology was more out of pride and humiliation than genuine regret. He was apologizing because my father was angry, not because he truly believed he had done something wrong. Scott, you are a capable person, my father said, and for a moment, Scott looked relieved. But then he realized he had misunderstood. My father's expression became cold and stern. But even if you're good at your job, a person who doesn't cherish their family can never be trusted. My father handed Scott a pen, a gesture that made Scott visibly shiver with fear. You should not be apologizing to me, my father said firmly, pushing the pen into Scott's hand. Shaken, Scott turned to me, pleading desperately. Julie, please don't go through with the divorce. I'll change, I promise. He fell to his knees, clinging to my legs, begging. I will prioritize Julie from now on, he vowed, but his words felt hollow, as if he were only saying what he thought I wanted to hear. Then out of nowhere, Scott blurted, please. If we divorce, I won't be able to pay off the debts. Debts? I asked, confused. What are you talking about? I repeated, stunned by this new information. Suddenly, Scott recoiled, covering his mouth, realizing he had said too much. He looked filled with regret. My father and I just stood there silently, staring at him in disbelief. Finally, after a long pause, Scott nervously began, well, it's about. He hesitated, clearly terrified to continue. But when he did, the truth shocked us both. Scott revealed that he and his mother had been confident that he would eventually take over as president of my father's company. Because of this, they had been spending recklessly, believing the company's wealth would soon be theirs. The reason he visited his mother's house so often was to indulge in a lavish lifestyle with her. The more I hear, the less I see any reason for you to stay married to this man, Julie, my father said, disgusted and too disappointed to say more. Scott, realizing how serious the situation had become, started pleading, please wait. If we get divorced, how will I live? Starting tomorrow, his endless apologies started to sound robotic, like a toy stuck on repeat, almost comical in their desperation. I said icily, that's not our concern, as I awaited Scott's signature on the divorce decree. Talking no longer made sense, so my father and I made the silent decision to grab a cup of coffee without even trying to offer Scott some. Ultimately, there was no difficulty in finalizing the divorce. The procedure proceeded easily because my father had retained a first-rate attorney and I had kept a thorough journal. In addition, we asked for alimony to compensate for the lost honeymoon expenses. My father was so adamant that I had to giggle when he declined Scott's side's request for a decrease. At work, word of our divorce immediately got out, and Scott's environment totally transformed. He chose to step down since he was feeling so uneasy. He didn't get much severance compensation because he chose to leave. His meager resources had to be used to settle his obligations and pay the alimony. He is currently leading a pretty simple life. His mother, on the other hand, is bedridden after becoming unwell. There are rumors circulating that Scott is taking up part-time employment and requesting financial assistance from his old coworkers, but who can tell whether they are accurate? People now make jokes about these stories during get-togethers. In my case, my father has finally made the decision to retire, and it appears that I will succeed him as business president thanks to the enthusiastic support of the staff. I was originally hesitant to take on such a significant responsibility, but witnessing my father's uncommon display of vulnerability, wanting to entrust the firm to a trustworthy person, inspired me to take on the challenge. I feel like I have to live up to his standards now. Even though I wasn't sure I wanted to be a leader, it appears I had my father's managerial skill. The corporation is performing better and better under his chairmanship. I started drawing more attention at different CEO gatherings since I gained this newfound confidence. Though I haven't given it much consideration, perhaps it's time for me to start a new chapter in my life.